This channel is part of the History Hit Network. The winter of 1918 is a particularly cold one. Freezing temperatures paralyze the United States. America has just entered the First World War and nothing can be allowed to disrupt or slow down troop training. And yet in the shadow of these preparations another peril awaits. A scourge worse than the war is about to strike. In a few short months wreak havoc and decimate the planet before disappearing again and be forgotten. It all starts at the military camp at Funster in Kansas, where 30,000 men are preparing for their baptism of fire on the battlefield. On March the 4th, a cook misses morning call ed by a corporal, then a sergeant. By midday more than 100 soldiers have had to pull out of training. They all have the same symptoms. A 40-degree fever, aching bodies, headaches, and a terrible cough. For Edward Schreiner, the base position, the diagnosis is obvious. The U.S. military are suffering from the flu. Private Irving Greenwald remembers the entire company went to the infirmary. The sick were examined, isolated, and were treated. After a few days' rest, the convalescent soldiers recover in the open air, but in the meantime the virus prospers and multiplies. It infects 10,000 men every week in high places. However, there is no undue concern. Flu rarely proves fatal towards victims for the time being. At the end of March 1918, the training camps empty as the troops head for the major ports on the United States East Coast. In the face of a newly aggressive Germany, American support has become crucial. Despite the speed of the outbreak, however, no measures are taken to limit contagion. The priority is to send 4 million men to the front. Day after day they set sail from New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. To transport such numbers, the number of transports and routes multiplies. Soon ships dock simultaneously: Liverpool, Brest, Bordeaux, and even Marseille. During the 8-day crossing, platoons of contact cases become battalions of flu victims. There are many sick among the 100,000 men who disembark every month. But many of them will recover. The virus has yet to show its true face. But in the meantime continues its silent migration. It becomes a faithful traveling companion, moving across France towards the front lines. The procession of liberators passes through towns and villages. With every hug and handshake, the virus discreetly enters the populations that it encounters in its path. It is first spotted around the harbors, then along the railway tracks, heading east as if it wants to join the fight. 4 years of fighting, the arrival of reinforcements is a relief. The soldiers get along and the virus cares little what uniform they are wearing. Little to the British and French suspect that a terrible scourge has slipped into the ranks of their new brothers in arms. The celebrations almost make them forget that the German enemy remains to be defeated. On April the 9th, 1918, there is a new onslaught on the Flanders trenches. Germany needs to win before America can fully deploy its forces. In a flash, the Kaiser's armies smash through the enemy lines and capture their fair share of prisoners. Allies panic and pull back. Germany has won the advantage. From that point onwards, it is a race against time. Huge overloaded convoys rush to the front at a breakneck pace. On board there are no comfortable bench seats or dining cars. Very basic hygiene and physical closeness are the order of the day. Soon overwhelmed by numbers, the Germans lose the upper hand. Losses on the German side are high. Sizable numbers of soldiers are also flawed by a sudden illness, a 3-day fever which becomes known as the Flanders flu. The virus has now taken hold on both sides. The press remains silent, however, under the watchful eye of the military senses. Spain is the first to break the news of the illness. The country is neutral and its newspapers are free to inform the world. Everyone knows that it flew from the north, now roams the Iberian Peninsula. Even King Alfonso XIII becomes bedridden and prime minister, and several advisors are also affected. Government meetings are adjourned until further notice. Madrid's unmarried residents continue to hum a tune from a fashionable operator that Spring the Naples Soldier. But once the death rate in the capital reaches double the normal level, the cheerful refrain takes on a darker tone. And new words: Soldier of Naples, curses be unto you, your lethal fever is a bad omen, you cause us nothing but trouble, blessed is anyone who survives. And by seasonal workers returning from the south of France, the virus spreads thanks to Spain's well-developed rail network. The French ambassador to Madrid explains his concerns. The epidemic is spread with extraordinary speed. In 3 days it has affected 70% of the population. If the epidemic hits France in a similar way, the resulting partial shutdown of national life could be frustrating. Exposed in Spain, the illness will henceforth be called the Spanish flu. By the end of May 1918, media and the warring nations finally break their silence. The scale of the epidemic is minimized in France. A few snippets claim that France is entirely unaffected by the so-called Spanish flu. However, increasing numbers of military reports indicate otherwise. Given a code-named Disease 11, its spread to every corner of the country is duly recorded. New cases appear by the day. On the American side, almost half of the country's submarine crews are on sick leave. Placing the virus in this superb underwater incubating environment makes it even more potent. On the British side, it affects 10% of the Navy's sailors. The Royal Navy is forced to call off major operations in the North Sea. On land, armies on all sides have become gigantic clusters. One report sums up the situation. One artillery brigade saw 1/3 of its troops fall within 48 hours. There was one day where only 15 men were fit for service out of a total of 145. Military headquarters are careful not to spread the news. In wartime, secrecy is vital. The enemy must know nothing. The New York Times is on the lookout. Even the combatants are not told the priorities. Troop morale and soldiers must focus on their duty. Everything must carry on as if the virus does not exist. So the sick and wounded are sent back to the rear. The British are returned home. No special precautions are taken when caring for these survivors from hell on earth. The virus crosses the English Channel silently, borne on stretches. The invasion of the southern United Kingdom now starts. In the north of the country, the situation goes from bad to worse. For weeks now, troops arriving from America have been passing through the harbor cities. In the working class suburbs, the number of cases is 20 times higher than normal. In Manchester, Dr. James Niven sounds the alarm. In a school, the children simply dropped on their desks like plants whose roots had been poisoned. The attack was sudden and drowsiness was a prominent symptom. A prevention pioneer, Niven advocates hand washing and social distancing. His recommendations inspire a new film genre dedicated to public health. Like this advertisement that shows how an office worker can infect his colleagues over the course of a single working day. But winning the war involves sacrifices. The head of the British Health Services, Sir Arthur Newshome, is ready to make them. The relentless needs of warfare justified incurring the risk of spreading infection. There is nothing more to be said. Nothing will be done to stem the invasion. By July 1918, on the German side, things are not looking good. General Ludendorff, chief strategist of the German army, declares the flu has spread everywhere. It's a grievous business having to listen every morning to the number of influencer cases in the chief of staff's complaints about the weakness of their troops due to a lack of able-bodied combatants. His army is forced to fall back. Given leave, sick and asymptomatic soldiers return home. They mingle with civilians already badly weakened by the hardships on the other side of the Rhine. The population of Germany, already bled dry, bears the full brunt of the epidemic. The first fatal cases are reported in Hamburg, Berlin, and Mannheim. On the Allied side, conversely, things are looking up with the good weather. The number of cases in the armed forces has dropped sharply. Summer, the epidemic seems to be subsiding and victory is in sight. The Daily Lallentown is delighted. Long live the Spanish flu, because in spite of everything, it is the motherlode that has given us some respite, both for our soldiers as well as folks to the rear. You believe the newspaper papers everything is already over. But in reality, the virus is roaming and the general population remains completely unaware of the invisible danger that hangs over them. Only the eminent Professor Fernando Widow warns contagion occurs in a very special way and spreads with a speed that is not found in any other disease. But his warnings fall on deaf ears, both with the authorities and public opinion, which is a shame, because at that time, shopping, going to work, getting your salary, or getting information required daily trips. Contact cases continue to circulate. Remote working, click and collect, and contactless payment are not yet an option. Unavoidable displacements create concentrations of population. City centers are overcrowded, public transport is packed, and markets are thronged with people. The spread of the virus is particularly compounded by the lack of shielding measures. By the summer of 1918, the flu is spread worldwide, from Portugal to Russia via Iceland, Italy, or Greece, and even as far as China. Case numbers explode. Epidemic has become a pandemic. Worse still, the virus has mutated and its summer variant is much more formidable. Now there are hundreds of deaths each week. A second wave, much more deadly than the first, has just started. Only Switzerland is aware of the challenge that it faces. On July the 18th, a federal decree recommends that cantons ban gatherings and shut down public venues. Any offender is liable to a heavy fine or even prison. But elsewhere, no preventive measures are taken to slow the spread of the scourge. The war still remains the highest priority. Deliveries of equipment and food intersect with troop transportation, part of an unceasing transatlantic ballet. One of the most frequent destinations at summer is Africa, a major supplier of manpower and raw materials to the colonial empires. The virus is first reported in Algeria, the Morocco, and Sierra Leone. On August 15, 1918, a merchant cruiser comes to refuel in Freetown, a hub of the coal trade in West Africa. There are 124 flu cases on board, including one fatality. While the body of the deceased is unloaded, dock workers load the ship's coal bunkers. 10 days later, 600 of them are infected. The casualty count starts increasing. Some of the locals call the disease man who, which means what is it? Even if they are unaware of the cause, they will see its effects all too soon. Within a month, almost a third of the country's population is infected. In Lagos, the capital of Nigeria, another cargo ship delivers its own cargo of influenza carriers. The Nigerians are aware that Europeans are importing the infection. Faith beliefs do the rest. Influenced by their marabouts, the general population flees the white hospitals in the cities to seek care at home in their native villages. Called influenza, the virus kills almost 500,000 people. At the same time, HMS Jaroslav is bringing back 1,300 men from Europe to South Africa with one fatal case on board. The sick are hospitalized, but the other passengers are allowed to go home after only 2 days of isolation. The virus will wipe out 300,000 South Africans at a speed that defies understanding. One Cape Town resident says has fallen upon us with the force of a tornado. In this British colony, the white community blames the disease on the Africans. The different local ethnic groups in the meantime accuse the whites of wanting to exterminate them. The truth is that 4 times more Africans are dying than settlers. The mistrust which sets in will fuel mutual hatred and hasten the setup of segregationist laws which will form the basis for apartheid. Soon the Spanish flu is spreading like gangrene through the entire African continent thanks to the rail and river connections built by the colonists to transport the continent's wealth. The virus quickly crosses jungles and deserts. In less than a year it slaughters 2.5 million people. While it is invading the rest of the world, the flu has also ravaged the country in which it originated. In mid-September it increases in the intensity. U.S. Army bases witness an unprecedented eruption. The base in Devens, Massachusetts is the worst hit. In a single month, the number of contaminations grows 500-fold. A military physician writes, these men start with what seems to be an ordinary attack of leg grip or influenza. They very rapidly develop the most vicious type of pneumonia that has ever been seen. A few hours later you can begin to see the cyanosis extending from their ears and spreading all over the face. It is hard to distinguish the colored men from the white. Victor Vaughan, the head of the Contagious Diseases Division, admits, I witnessed the hundreds of deaths of the soldiers in the army camps and did not know what to do. At that moment I decided never again to prate about the great achievements of medical science and to humbly admit our dense ignorance in this case. For those who come face to face with it, this flu is something to be feared. But others are not wary enough of it. Even high-ranking personalities become infected. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George is one such case. He is secretly hospitalized for 9 days at the height of the war. He is a death's door. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then a young Assistant Secretary of the Navy, is another famous flu victim. On his return from an inspection tour in France, he is disembarked on a stretcher with secondary infections in both of his lungs. One case is less well known at the time. Frederick Trump, the grandfather of another future president, also succumbs to the virus. He leaves behind 3 children and a sufficient inheritance for his widow to found a real estate empire. By the end of September 1918, as the Allies are on the brink of victory, the flu is killing soldiers as fast as machine guns and artillery. Within the U.S. military, voices start to call for a suspension of the dispatch of fresh troops. The final decision-maker, General Peyton March, is firmly opposed to this. Any slowdown might lead to defeat, declares. Every such soldier who has died of influenza just as surely played his part as his comrade who died in France. His only concession: soldiers exhibiting symptoms should be isolated. The others will go into battle whatever the cost. The best way to do this is to use the largest ocean liner at the time, confiscated from Germany at the start of the war. The USS Leviathan, the flagship of the fleet, will become the largest Spanish flu carrier ever. One of the crew describes her 9th transatlantic voyage as a nightmare. It was heartbreaking to see men falling dead at our feet. It was as if an invisible hand roamed the ship, suddenly dragging them away into oblivion. The deaths are methodically recorded in the ship's log. There is at least 1 death every hour upon arrival in breast of the ship's 12,000 passengers. 2,000 are sick and close to 100 have already died. Over the following days, several dozen men will pass away in the region's hospitals. Each new troop ship arrival brings a cargo of the dying. Kilometers away from the front line, young Americans are being buried in their hundreds before ever hearing the sound of gunfire. In the United States, the virus, which has escaped from the military camps, now slaughters the civilian population. Boston, close to the ill-fated Camp Devens, is the first city to be affected. Neighboring cities follow. Neighboring cities follow. Many doctors call for draconian preventive measures, but the authorities fail to see the need for them. The war is not over. The fourth fundraising campaign to finance the war effort has just got underway. Americans are being called upon to reach into their wallets to fill the war coffers. On September 28, 1918, Philadelphia organizes a massive parade. An enthusiastic crowd of 200,000 people flocked to the event, where soldiers and civilians celebrate equally. It will be a memorable event. Particularly for the virus, the following week the number of victims skyrockets. The city's hospitals are overwhelmed, beds pile up in the corridors, working shifts is improvised and medical staff are exhausted. Dr. Sidney Rosenblatt writes, "For the last couple of weeks I have been going through a living hell. All I was doing was pronouncing and signing death certificates. With more than 650 deaths daily, funeral services cannot keep up, churches are closed. Horse-drawn carts play the streets collecting the dead. Many of the unburied bodies end up in hastily dug trenches. Unfortunately, no one learns the lessons from the Philadelphia disaster." The same week, New York hosts the traditional Columbus Day Parade, which is attended by the president himself, an enthusiastic promoter of the event. Wilson is careful not to comment on the pandemic. Second wave will peak New York 15 days later, reaching a sad record of more than 5,000 deaths in a single week. No one is yet aware that humanity has been plunged into the gravest health crisis in its history. It will soon have claimed more victims than the war. In autumn 1918, the virus redoubles in intensity from Boston to Bombay, from Rome to Rio. Its deadly variant is devastating. British India, relatively unharmed by the first wave, becomes a channel house in a land of 250 million people. The virus is spoiled for choice. Everywhere trains roll into stations packed with the dead and dying. In the Punjab, the worst affected region, there are already close to 1 million victims. One doctor reports the hospitals were choked so that it was impossible to remove the dead quickly enough to make room for the dying. In Delhi, 1 out of every 2 hospitalized patients dies. The dead are cremated on riverside pies. But wood reserves are exhausted and cremation becomes impossible. Instead of ashes, the waterways carry away bodies. The number of deaths is estimated at 20 million, a figure that is very likely underestimated. For 7 months now, the pandemic has been spreading to every corner of the globe. Goering, the young survivor, remembers many patients were delirious to the point of violence and had to be tied to their beds. "I saw purple and black blotches develop on them. When dying, I was told all pregnant women died." In Montreal, one doctor remembers, "I was seeing 50 cases a day and sometimes 4, 5 or 6 patients from the same family who could not breathe. I would come back the next day and 2 or 3 of them would be dead." Young orphan tells us his story. "My father died first, my mother died the next day. Before we could bury them, my younger sister joined them. She was born just before my mother passed away." In Paris, Dr. Margaret Barbieri confesses, "We felt helpless, and some, in the face of the severity of the symptoms and the overwhelming speed of the disease, went so far as to compare it to the plague or cholera. By the end of October, French hospitals can no longer cope and call for help. Medicine is weaponless and science helpless. Usually seasonal influenza attacks children and the elderly. The Spanish version strikes down young healthy adults in less than 2 days and nothing can save them. At the time, the only weapon available to doctors was aspirin. This is the only effective weapon against the 40-degree fever freely prescribed. However, this remedy kills more people than it saves. Overdoses shorten the suffering of the dying. Patients any way you can." In France, eminent medical professors try bloodletting, others recommend turpentine inhaled, gargled or injected. Sanitary guidelines, often restrictive, now become a part of daily life. The most popular is the dispensing of rum and cognac with a medical prescription. In the United States, the police distributes seized contraband alcohol in the military camps. Even if the bourbon doesn't provide a cure, it raises spirits. In Canada, they prefer Scotch, whereas in South Africa, brandy is the typical of choice. A new drink becomes wildly popular: quinine whiskey cocktail. In France, quinine is also recommended, but without the whiskey. So is alpine tea, the virtues of which are unsuspected. A cure for head colds also promises miracles in the United States, a powerful laxative. 10-lac is administered with great abandon. Snake oil salesmen take full advantage. A multitude of treatments in pills, syrups or ointments, each more useless than the other, flourishes while the virus continues its deadly work. The onset of the second wave forces the authorities to limit the contagion. New York closes its shops at rush hour, and San Francisco its courthouses trials take place in the open air. From Seattle to Karachi, theaters and cinemas close down. Seoul prohibits access to all public venues. Manchester closes its schools. And in Africa, village chieftains restrict gatherings, including funerals. After many months of negligence, there is a widespread increase in awareness across the 5 continents. Everything possible is done to limit social interaction. Despite this, in France the terraces remain open until 7 p.m. Thus Spain closes its borders while Australia blockades its ports and Japan drops preventive leaflets by air. Elsewhere, some universities remain closed and courses are taught in the open air. And delivery men are deprived of their customers. Although there is as yet no mention of lockdown, staying at home has become the norm. As the days pass, prevention messages become orders. Use a handkerchief when you sneeze. One leaflet hammered out by the U.S. Surgeon General reads: coughs and sneezes spread diseases as dangerous as poison gas shells. Messages posted along public highways and on public transport set the tone. A symbol of a society at risk, masks now form the core of the passive defense system. A pioneer in this area, Japan requires the use in towns, including for younger generations. In the United States, some states make them compulsory, as in California, where the governor calls them the patriotic duty of every citizen. In San Francisco, as in New York, offenders are liable to fines and those who resist are arrested and tried. Protesters organize in the name of individual freedom but run the risk of being shot. In Paris, on the other hand, the press wonders, will Parisian ladies agree to disfigure themselves to protect their bronchial tubes? I'm afraid they will catch their deaths rather than wear a mask. This protective gag does not muzzle humor or inventiveness. Wearing a mask will remain at the trial stage. This is because by mid-October the newspapers still insist that the general state of health in Paris is satisfactory. Surreal optimism at the very moment that the epidemic is about to reach its peak in the French capital. In the major cities, the morgues are full and the bodies are piling up for lack of coffins and hearses. Churches are off limits to the living and hurried burials are done at night with no family to say goodbye. During this deadly outbreak, the virus sweeps through the countryside from Urgeau to Normandy. An abbot gives the last rite so often that it kills him. In town halls, as many death certificates are issued in a week as there are normally in a year. Thai villagers are decimated. The Spanish flu smothers everything like a plague of locusts on crops. It feasts for 15 days before disappearing and reappearing elsewhere. On November the 11th, 1918, the First World War is finally over. The victors and vanquished succumb to a collective fever, but this time it is a welcome one. Good news never travels alone. Mortality rates drop. The pandemic is retreating. 2 days after the end of the war, the newspapers read the flu is on the run just like the crowds. The celebrations are a boon for a virus that is far from sated. Peace celebrations provide the ideal setting for the virus to attack again. A third wave will soon break and strike even the most remote areas. In mid-November, a ship from New Zealand heads for a string of Pacific islands that has so far been spared. By the time it stops over in Fiji, the SS Talon has 5-6 sailors on board. Continuing its journey, the ship docks in Western Samoa and Tonga, spreading its deadly toxin to the very heart of a Melanesian population which has never been exposed to the influenza virus. It is customary for relatives of a sick person to lie down beside him as a sign of empathy. Up to 1 in 5 of the island's inhabitants will lose their lives. One observer reports day and night trucks rumbled down the streets loaded with bodies for the pyres which burned continuously. Crushed demographic levels on Fiji will take 20 years to recover. The macabre journey of the Italian fortunately avoided the neighboring islands of American Samoa. Strict protocol was enforced: the compulsory quarantine for arriving ships and shore patrols to prevent illegal landings. Boys. American Samoa was one of the few places to be spared the ravages of the Spanish flu. Because even on the edge of the ice floes in inhospitable terrain where it seems impossible for life to gain a foothold, the virus manages to seek out its prey. In Alaska, thanks to a brief meeting with a fisherman or a dock worker, makes its way into the midst of families. Taking advantage of traditional habitats in which each household shares a common room. Without ventilation or windows, in order to protect themselves from the harsh climate, the most effective heating system is physical closeness. In some isolated villages, 85% of the population die. The survivors, generally children, rarely survive very long. Left to their feet, many die of cold or hunger. Almost a year after it first appeared, the virus continues on its infernal path. The last bastion of resistance, Australia, so far protected thanks to a strict maritime quarantine. At the end of December, however, a warship slips through the safety net. 96 soldiers disembark home from the war. 1/3 of the city's population is infected. In January 1919, the virus has a disastrous impact on Japan. In February, the Ukraine bids farewell to its queen of the screen. An icon of Russian cinema, Vera Kolodnya, is struck down at the age of 25. In March, the Rio Carnival is a bright shining light. The splendor of the festivities will not, however, erase the memories, the slaughter that follows. In April, Canada mourns its ice hockey legend Joe Hull. His sudden death at the age of 37 will become a symbol of the pandemic. In the spring of 1919, President Woodrow Wilson makes his way to Europe. 4 months after Germany's defeat, the question of war reparations continues to divide the victors. Only the American leader believes that excessively severe sanctions might stir up a desire for revenge amongst the losers. He intends to win over his allies. But suddenly a bombshell hits on April the 3rd. The Allies' meetings are postponed. Wilson has fallen seriously ill. Cary Grayson, his personal physician, privately confides. The president was suddenly taken violently sick with the influenza at a time when the whole of civilization seemed to be in the balance. 5 days later, the convalescent is back, but to those who know him, he's no longer the same. They have never seen him so worn out, so tired. His head bodyguard is distraught.